Hi, I'm Jack Burgess. In a minute we're going to have an operating session on my Yosemite Valley Railroad, but first I want to give you a few orientation points. Typically, if I have people that have never operated this layout come by, I'll probably spend half an hour going around telling them how things work, where things are located, and so forth. I'm not going to go into that much detail. Let me just say that it is a 20 by 20 layout. It's pure point-to-point. There's a turntable at one end, there's a Y at the other end. We operate 4 trains with 4 one-person crews. I don't have room for a conductor plus an engineer. So each engineer has to do all the thinking, throwing the switches himself. 2 of the trains are going to run from one end to the other. One's going to run from Merced up to El Portal. El Portal was at the boundary of the Yosemite National Park, and that was the end of the railroad. Merced the railroad there connected to the Southern Pacific. So one's going to run from Merced to El Portal, the other one from El Portal to Merced. Those are prototype trains that ran every day except for Sunday in August 1939, the month I model. The difference here is that we run them on a timetable. The YV ran those true trains as extras. I have that option. If 4 people came in and they say, we want to run extras, I can do that. I have a timetable that'll accommodate that. But in all the years I've been having operating sessions, only one crew wanted to do that. It's a lot more work on the operator's position as opposed to timetable. One other train that we're going to run is a log train. It starts in Merced, goes up to Merced Falls, picks up some empty log cars, takes them up to Incline, takes the caboose and turns and comes back, picks up the loads, takes them back down to Merced Falls and back to Merced. That was on the timetable. That was a timetable train every day in August 1939 except for Sundays. The last train is the only fictitious train. It runs the opposite direction from the log train, and it picks up what the YV called as rock cars, which are 22-foot long hopper cars. So one other thing I want to mention is we run by a fast clock. My clock is an 8 to 1 clock. That is a very fast clock. 1 minute on the clock goes by in about 7.5 seconds. I've had situations where an engineer will get done with all the work. He's ready to leave. He looks at the timetable. He's got 15 minutes before he has to leave. So he's looking around the layout. Next time he looks at the clock, he's running late. I know it puts stress on the operators, which doesn't bother me. But I do it because it produces a timetable that is very close to the prototype. On my layout, it takes 24 minutes to go from Merced to Merced Falls. On the prototype, it was 50 minutes. So the timetable looks like it should be. You spend an entire day, you start at 5:30 in the morning, the last train rolls in about 8 o'clock that night. So things look right. And that's the only reason I'm using such a fast clock. I tell people, don't worry about it. When I built the timetable, I built it on even a faster clock. I built it on a 10 to 1 clock. So there's some slop built in. Also, I've allowed for switching. A lot of the switching takes place before the first train departs. So the actual crew comes to work at 5:30. Their train may not leave until 10 o'clock in the morning, which is 50 or 30 minutes later. So there's plenty of time for everything to get done. This is the timetable that the crews will be using today. This is based on a prototype Yosemite Valley Railroad timetable for the same time period. So this is what you'll see the crews holding their hands and staring at all day long. There's a couple of things that this shows. Bold is when there was a meet, and you can look across and see where the meets were. So if you're going along, if you get to a time period and the times are bold, that means somebody's going to come and meet you there. I also use switch lists. The switch lists are only used by the locals. The other 2 trains pick up what's there. They pick up all the rock cars, or they pick up all of the log cars, whatever. So you'll see 2 of the operators with this in their hand continuously and flipping it over. On the back, it tells you what the names of the turnouts are, the spot locations. These are based on the actual names that the railroad used. Again, this form is a duplicate of the prototype switch list. You'll notice one difference is I use station names, and on the prototype they used the milepost. You'll see a 78 which means that was delivered to El Portal. It was just quicker. They all knew what it meant. I should have mentioned that I do not have a regular crew, so everybody that comes over to operate is either brand new or hasn't been here for a year or more. I only operate every other year regularly. Operations is not my thing. So a lot of the stuff I've done is designed to help that person that has never been here before. You'll also see the crew with this in their hand. Typically they have this, the switch list if they have a switch list, and the timetable. And they're staring at both of them. This is kind of like a cheat sheet. This is what, if you worked on the prototype and your mentor was with you in the cab the very first day, and he was telling you, okay, then you come up here and you've got to take water or whatever. This tells them step by step what they need to do, so they don't go by a station and not do what they're supposed to. On the back, if they have time, are the whistle signals. I don't hear too many visitors that remember to blow the whistle. 2 for going forward, 3 for going back up, and so forth.
The workday starts at 5:30 on the layout clock. One of today's operators, Ed, is retrieving the caboose for the Merced local. This is Ray. He's operating the rock train today.
You can get out of the way. You can't pass the yard limits. Huh? Okay.
He's taking the train to the yard limits. Also in El Portal, Otis is collecting cars for the El Portal local.
Okay, which one's that one?
Back in Merced, Ed pulls cars for the Merced local. Ray has 2 hours before departure of the rock train. Luckily, on an 8 to 1 clock, that's not very long. In Merced Falls, empty log cars are being pulled out of the log spur and set out on the runaround track by Larry. He's our 4th operator in the session today. Larry runs around the log cars to be picked up by the log train. Once the log train is ready, it departs Merced Falls eastbound. The rock train picks up its cut of loaded rock cars and departs westbound for Merced. The Merced local waits for a clear signal to cross the Santa Fe Railroad tracks.
white, right?
The log train arrives in Bagby. It has a scheduled meet with today's rock train here. As scheduled, the rock train meets with the log train in Bagby. At Incline, the westbound El Portal local passes the station and takes the siding for the meet with the eastbound log train. After passing the now departed log train, the rock train backs up to take water before departing Bagby. The log train arrives at Incline, meeting with the El Portal local. After dropping the empties on the passing track, the log train heads for the Y at Moss Canyon.
Dropping here. Picking it up.
The log train is turned on the Y. It will then head back to Incline. After leaving the loaded rock cars near the Portland cement plant spur, the rock train heads for Merced to turn.
So then you push it on.
With markers on only one end, the caboose must also be turned on the turntable in Merced. Ray waits patiently for departure time. The log train departs Incline. It's worth noting that all of the curves on the layout have spiral easements for better operations and appearance. The Merced local has paused on this siding in Emory for a scheduled meet with the log train here.
But it's sports, everyone wants. Still wants to do a minus 31. Well, this should be way over here. Okay. And,
The Merced local makes a set out at Incline.
took the chains off on the far side, and then I just put them down. Now, there's one picture of a crane on the other
The log train crosses a bridge over Exchequer Reservoir. In Merced Falls, the El Portal local has finished its work in town and now waits on the station track for a scheduled meet with the eastbound rock train. The log train has come down from Incline with its loads and is waiting on the siding. The rock train arrives and pulls in as far as it can, clearing the switch on the west side of the yard. The log train pulls forward just enough to clear the east switch. Once the switch is clear, the rock train continues on its way. This maneuver is referred to as a saw-by and is utilized when one train is too long to fit in the siding. The log train backs up again so the El Portal local can depart. Once the switches are aligned, it's safe for the El Portal local to continue westward. The Merced local turns on the Y before backing into El Portal. The rock train crosses the bridge on its way eastward. The only tasks remaining now are for Ed to put the caboose away and tie up. That will complete a 14-hour workday. Otis has arrived in Merced with the El Portal local and begins making setouts. After leaving the loaded log cars at Merced Falls, the engine for the log train is turned on the turntable in Merced.
The corned beef is cooking already.
After leaving the empty rock cars at Emory, the rock train heads for El Portal to tie up after a 12-hour day. Back in Merced, the log train engineer Larry ties up after a 14-hour day.
Well, that's part of the story. The rest of it is the reason they were competitive. You find when you go around the country at these various places that every area is a center of some brain. Because when you go around and work on the buildings, you do some Kansas City's an easy DC.
And finally, the El Portal local is tied up by engineer Otis after a 15-hour workday.